Afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Anish. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of NIT, and thank you so much for joining us today at our presentation on how ESPN is leveraging end-to-end AI-powered research to keep a pulse on the youth audience. Again, my name is Anish. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of NIT, and today I am so excited to be joined by Lauren Kaling. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. Do you mind giving us a quick background on your role at ESPN?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for joining and being here. I'm excited. So I oversee the fan and marketplace insights practice within ESPN Research. And at its core, it's really all about studying the fan through both measurement and primary study. When it comes to the marketplace side, that's really about taking a step back from being a sports fan, and it's just about thinking about the consumer more holistically. So how are they spending their time with entertainment and media at large? And then thinking about ESPN in context against competitors, both within sports and outside.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure everyone here has heard of ESPN, but if you're hearing about NIT for the very first time, think about us as your AI research assistant. We've built this end-to-end AI platform that's helping some of the world's best brands like ESPN combine quant, video, and AI to get a more holistic understanding of their consumers. Now, the way we do that is through our AI research assistant, which, a second here.
The clicker, I'll do this.
It's not updating. Let's see.
Sorry.
Had the same issue 2 speakers ago.
All good. We'll get this figured out. Cool. All right. Awesome. So an end-to-end AI research assistant that helps with everything from survey design to gathering your, fielding your sample to analyzing both quant and qual together at scale, and finally helping you build out really powerful consumer stories through a reporting tool. So we'll be talking a little bit more about this as we hear from Lauren on how she's been using the NIT platform to uncover some really interesting insights around youth fandom. So on that note, before we dive in, Lauren, would just love to start off by hearing a little bit more about the work your team has historically been doing at ESPN and kind of what prompted you to look for a partner like NIT.
Yeah, so audience expansion is a huge focus for our team. And at ESPN, especially, the word youth is thrown around a lot, as I'm sure if you work at a big organization, it is. So really our role has been to educate the company on what that means. When they say youth, who are they talking about? What age groups? What are the needs and content preferences of these young people? And to date, studying Gen Z and Gen Alpha for us has been about big, custom, long-term holistic projects that oftentimes we're running on a yearly or bi-yearly basis. But we know young people change so fast. So the NIT solution has really enabled us to have a more ongoing, quick-turn, longitudinal pulse on how young people are behaving and, for us particularly, consuming content.
Awesome. And you touched on a couple things there, Lauren. So access to that youth audience, the ability to get that end-to-end research done really quickly through the AI tools, and then finally bringing that to life with these videos and these customer stories here. So what we'll do over the next couple minutes is we'll start off by kind of walking through Lauren's process for analyzing research on the NIT platform, and then we'll actually dive into some of the really interesting insights from a recent study that Lauren's been running around youth fandom. So to kick it off, let's just walk through kind of how you've been analyzing research on the NIT platform. Lauren, I know one of the first places most of our partners start is with our AI summaries tool. It looks through the transcript of all the video responses that you get on the or on the NIT platform, generates a summary for you, quantifies those key qualitative themes, and also cites them for you. Can you share a little bit more about how you've been using this historically and how this fits into your workflow?
Yeah, so this is a great starting point. It just takes an overall snapshot of the study in totality and gives us an overview that we can then start thinking about, okay, what is our narrative? what specific insights or themes are we going to start pulling from? And as Anish mentioned, there are citations here. So the first insight was about how young people feel playing sports benefits them. So we can really easily click into those 14 instances where people cited something like that. So there's the AI, but then very quickly you can tap back into what a respondent actually said. There's huge transparency there.
Awesome. And then from there, Lauren, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, we do have these kind of thematic analysis tool that identifies those key themes, builds out that hierarchy. Can you share a little bit more about how you've used this tool to kind of dive in a little bit deeper into some of those themes?
Yeah, so we think of this as really our second step. So as you can see here, these are actual respondent responses, and guided by the thematics on the left-hand side, we can dig in, cut by different demographics within our study, and just start to hone in on that story that we want to tell.
Now, my personal favorite is being able to kind of talk to the data as well, which is why we launched our AI chatbot, Ada, which allows you to ask any pointed question, filter by any of the different quantitative filters you've asked. Could you share some of the use cases for this and how this has shown up in your research process?
Yeah, so Ada's awesome. I don't know if she's a girl, but she's our girl. We love her. So one really cool thing about Ada is, we're talking about youth today, but we also did a recent study, a standalone study on the Super Bowl. We have the Super Bowl in 2.5 years, but we're studying it already. So say a client comes back to us in 3 months and says, oh, I have a new question. We can remine the data in a new way, and we don't have to run a whole new study. We can tap into what we heard before. And it works the same way as sort of the other screens that you saw. It really summarizes whatever your question was and then easily allows you to click into those specific citations that drove the answer.
So one of the things we'll also be talking a lot about in the research that we'll be walking through here in a second, Lauren, is this being able to kind of tell a story with that data. So whether it's through Ada's chatbot, the summary tool, the thematic tool, finding those key videos that talk about those themes that are important to you, and then telling a story with it, bringing it to life through our Sizzle Reel or Share Reel tool. Can you just share a little bit more about how you guys are using that?
Yeah, building out videos is very easy and intuitive using Knit. And this is something that there's really no substitute for, like giving the voice of your consumer directly to your internal clients.
Awesome. Well, now that we've kind of walked through how you've been using the tool, would love to dive into some of the insights that came out of the most recent study that you guys ran, or series of study that you guys ran around youth and the sports landscape in general. So just to give you guys some context or the backdrop for all of this, social media is a place that this younger audience, Gen Z and Gen A, is spending a lot of time on. And obviously that has huge implications for your business and brand. Lauren, can you share a little bit more about kind of the foundational research you guys were starting with and what questions it prompted for ESPN?
Yeah, so we obviously all know that young people spend a lot of time in social, but we wanted to put a finer point on it. For this study in particular, we are recruiting kids who use social media at least a few times a week. But what we uncovered here is that, as you can see on the screen, 94% use social every day, but the 17 is really what I think is super cool. 17% say they use social all day. And that is a scale that we played around with. We actually kept having to go higher and higher. The idea that like 20% of kids, social is omnipresent in their lives, they do not turn it off, is really crazy and is helping guide our content strategy.
So for this study specifically, could you share a little bit more about some of the research objectives? What were you guys trying to answer with the series of studies that we're conducting?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the beginning, we have a lot of foundational research, but the one piece of things that changes really rapidly is the content and the choices that they're making for consumption. Because kids are so intersectional and they have the ability to tap into really niche interests, we want to know what are the platforms they're spending time on, what are the accounts they're following, who are the creators that they're tuned into. So it really was about content at its core. We put a sports lens on that as well. And then lastly, we also wanted to understand more about the ESPN brand as it exists for kids today. So what do they think of when they hear the 4 letters ESPN? And then how do they feel about the content that we're creating out in their environments?
Awesome. So before we dive into any of this data, would love to talk about who this data is coming from. So, in this study, a couple things stood out to me. One is the audience. We were looking at a much younger audience than we typically do on the NIT platform. We also had a really good mix of quant and qual, and it was a really quick turnaround, 4 days from study design to data in the dashboard, and you guys jumping in there to analyze it. Can you share just a little bit more about the design and kind of the way you guys have approached this research?
Yeah, so you can see the study spec up on the screen, but I'll kind of talk it through piece by piece. So we really wanted to focus in on middle school and high school kids. And that sort of younger demographic, especially on the low end here, is something that we really love that NIT has stood up pretty recently. The COPPA compliance, we use it pretty frequently. And then when it comes to number of respondents, it's pretty low here at 25, but we are running this research monthly or every other month. So we're able to build up a pretty significant sample over time. And then, as Anish mentioned, it is a dynamic between quant and qual. So we're running both, and our qual is focused on video responses. And that's something, if you think about, bigger custom projects, if you're doing IDIs, getting that depth is going to take a lot more time, and often the sample sizes are even smaller than this.
Perfect. Well, let's dive into the good stuff now and get into the data. So one of the key topics that we were looking at here was this overlap between spending time on social and then spending time on gaming and gaming-related content. Could you expand a little bit more on what some of those key insights were and why that was an interesting topic for you guys in the first place?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about social already, but the main two buckets of time for young people are social and gaming. But when we think about gaming, it's not just you're playing a video game on your own. It really is, there's a whole environment for kids to explore. You can follow your favorite streamers on social. You can buy their merch. You can talk to your friends in real life. You can talk to friends internationally on Discord. You can create your own games on Roblox. There is just a really rich community that forms around gaming. And when we see a NIT, we talk more holistically about content at large. Like, what are you consuming? What's your content in a week? We really hear gaming come out strong, even when we're not prompting for gaming.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what we were able to capture in these video verbatims. It's almost like gaming is kind of actually playing games is almost kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of how they're engaging with gaming-related content online.
Yeah, and gaming is an awesome proxy for thinking back to engaging with sports and sports fans. There's a ton we can learn from the gaming community that we can parlay back to our own fans.
So later on in the study, you guys actually dive into how does this translate into where they are spending their time? What are some of those key platforms and how much time are they spending on it? Do you mind diving into some of those learnings as well?
Yeah, so from prior research, we know that YouTube still wins out on scale. About 7 in 10 kids use YouTube every single day. Number 2 on that list is gaming at large. Number 3, TikTok. And the dynamic between YouTube and TikTok is interesting and constantly evolving. But today, among kids who use both YouTube and TikTok, 3/4 actually say that they would choose TikTok if they could only choose one.
So pretty familiar with most of these platforms. Have never heard of Zigazoo before, though. So can you just take a second to share a little bit more about what that platform is and also how you're using this research to just stay on top of some of the up-and-coming platforms within this world?
Yeah, Zigazoo is a social platform for young kids who want to try out challenges in a pretty safe way on social. But but the more sort of custom versions of our youth research wouldn't enable us to really quickly insert up-and-coming brands, and that's something that we have been able to turn on via these youth studies.
So, when we talk about a topic like how this younger audience is spending time on social, on gaming, it's hard to talk about these topics without mentioning that it also has a huge impact on their behaviors, on their habits, and also on their mental health. And I know this is something that you guys have spent a lot of time thinking about. Can you share a little bit about your POV on what this impact has been on the mental health of younger consumers, Gen Z and Gen A?
Yeah, so it's an interesting juxtaposition even to my own childhood. I didn't have much screen time growing up, but these kids are just always online, and it leaves them wanting a balance between being enriched and being able to escape. So if you think of the value that they see in their time in the digital world, it really is all about diving into niche communities and passions and having a place where they can be free to be themselves, unjudged. But because life is stressful today and they want a place to unwind. But kind of think about the other side of that. TikTok binges really leave them feeling drained and unproductive. And sometimes it pushes them to even, delete these apps or take a social detox. But an alternative to an all-out detox is just finding a bit more balance in the content they are consuming. Content that might inspire them to actually do something. So it could be educational information or inspiring content.
Yeah, and just anecdotally speaking, I'm part of Gen Z, just a handful of years older than some of the folks that we actually talked to in this survey. And this is something I'm seeing across my friend group. I had a friend that went on a 3-month Instagram and TikTok detox, and another person that just came back from a trip where they literally locked their phones away for a couple of days while they were camping out over the weekend. So it is something that we're seeing a lot in the data, but also anecdotally. And then I think also something that's been accelerated post-pandemic, especially for this younger audience. So let's talk about that a little bit as well. How are you guys, knowing all of this, how are you guys shifting, or how is this guiding your content strategy today?
Yeah, we talked about sort of like content that leaves you feeling a little bit more enriched, but there's also the trend of young people just wanting more in real life experiences, and that was something that was definitely driven by the pandemic. They feel like things were taken away from them, or they were cheated out of experiences. If you think about just simply going to a sleepover with friends, or maybe something more impactful like prom or graduation in an auditorium. So there is a real yearning, as you can see on this chart, to be with other people in real life, but there remains a gap with the number of teens and young people who feel like they actually are able to do that today.
And this aligns really well with the data we saw on what Gen Z and Gen A's favorite activities are. Could you expand a little bit on that overlap between the content you're creating and how that lines up with some of their favorite activities?
Yeah, so we asked a pretty general question. What was your favorite thing you did or watched in the past week? And we might have thought we'd get a lot of answers about social media or SVOD programs, but we got a lot of this. It was like social behaviors, in-person behaviors, and it was great to see that tie. Yeah,
and just to call this out, like the most stereotypical, I think, answer on that around gaming is around, still playing a game like Mario Party that is very multiplayer, very social, and so it's kind of great to see that shift back to in real life or more social experiences.
Yeah, kids are getting pretty creative about sort of the funnel between physical and digital, and this is kind of a good example. Like, you're able to play a multiplayer game in person with your family, or you can do it online with friends around the world.
Totally, but across all of these activities, the key trend here is in person, and it seems like that's just a huge part of how this next generation wants to interact.
Yeah, in-person is huge, and if we kind of tie it now back to sports and fandom formation still really hinges on participation, which at its root is in real life.
So can you expand a little bit more on that? What do we mean by, in-person really being one of those pillars to driving a path to fandom?
Yeah, so despite so much that has changed in the lives of young people, fandom formation actually remains tied to its roots. And these are ways that everyone sitting in this room probably became a sports fan yourself. So play takes 3 forms. It can be actual participation, playing sports video games, or observing play by attending a sporting event. But there's lots of flavors of this for young people to tap into.
And we saw this across most of the videos that we gathered, right, from this next generation. What was kind of the top line of some of these video responses on this topic?
Yeah, so most kids were engaged in play of some type. And typically when we think of participation, we immediately think of like organized participation. But competitive play is giving way to much more casual forms of participation. Just people saying, I got outside and it makes me be a little bit more healthy. That is a great version of play in our world today.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for, first of all, being open to walking us through these insights. I know this is something that we're running research on every couple months, so really excited to see how this data trends over the next several months and several quarters. I want to take a step back, because one of the things that you mentioned earlier on was how important it is to have a more regular pulse on this younger audience. Things are just changing so quickly. They're spending so much time on things like social media, so their behaviors, their preferences are changing at the speed of social media. And a lot of traditional research methods really aren't built for that. So can you share a little bit more about how you've been using NIT and our AI tools to run research faster to keep a more ongoing pulse and gut check on this younger audience?
Yeah, so we will continue to do big custom studies. That's an important part of our knowledge base. But NIT just really enables this ongoing, constant pulse on multiple generations that we really care about learning about constantly. So the process that you see on the right here is obviously just that, really quick. We're able to manipulate things if we see things changing. And we learned a lot too. We learned about the dynamic between the social and gaming spaces. We're constantly adjusting the funnel between digital and physical. So even in just the first few months, there's been a lot of great learnings here.
And the second thing that I took away from, as we were talking about the impact this research is having, is this idea of bringing the voice of the fan or the voice of the customer to life. And we've spent a lot of time building our platform to help our partners identify what are those key themes, what are the videos that are driving those key themes, and then how can you tell a story with those videos. Could you share a little bit more about the impact sharing the voice of the customer has had across as you share this research across your organization?
Yeah, so as we know, as researchers in this room, we get to hear from the consumer directly nearly every day, but that's more of a novelty, an amazing thing to have for our internal clients. And this really enables that in a real way, and a consistent way, and a turnkey way.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, thank you again for walking through all of this. It has been so awesome to kind of have a front row seat to some of these insights that you guys are uncovering. I think despite the technical difficulties, we still have enough time for some questions. So I would love to open it up to the audience and happy to answer any. Yes.
One question is for Nick and one is for both of you. So for both of you, what was the process from a privacy and legal perspective in getting permission to collect all the video from kids? And then for the Nick side, is this a platform that only functions as like a throughput for Nick, or can you upload video that you collected from other research projects that you worked on? And if so, are you able to search across the entire library?
Yeah, for sure. I can tackle the privacy one and feel free to add anything. So we got COPA compliant earlier this year, so we have all the parental guide, verification and all of that built in directly into the platform. So that was once we got the technical aspect of it. The legal aspect was actually easier because there's a playbook for that, but the technical aspect of it was a little bit trickier. So once we got those integrations built into our platform, the process has not been any different from running traditional research on our platform. Did you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, just as part of sort of the wider Disney organization, we run research on kids all the time. So as long as they follow compliances, it's pretty much good on our side as well.
And then to your question on importing data, right? So we like to think about ourselves as kind of like a BYOP, like bring your own panel, whether you can use our panel. In this case, that's what Lauren was doing. But you can also import your data, layer this on top of your existing panel providers or internal panel. So yeah, there's a bunch of different ways. We kind of want to meet you wherever you are and be more data agnostic and focus on how can we actually help you analyze that data in days instead of weeks. Yes.
Yeah, and I've been in the industry for a while now too. I definitely can recognize sort of the value in that, and we still do a good amount of that. It just sort of jumpstarts the process and categorizes things efficiently for you. You still have the ability to manipulate, like, oh, they thought of it this way, but based on my business, I actually want to think of it this way in terms of a thematic. So you still have the ability to pivot, but it just makes it faster and easier a little bit. I still feel like I'm connecting with the respondent in the same way as if I'm reading every single verbatim, but it also helps us filter out things that we might not care about for a particular analysis.
Yes.
You mentioned end-to-end and upfront and being able to either write your own surveys or using AI prompting in that regard. Talk a little bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah. So basically, the way we built it out is you throw in your business and research objectives. Our AI can recognize those, and then actually it generates a survey for you based on our best practices for what works best on our platform. So typically, it's like 26 to 30 quant-qual combo. So you'll get some quantitative question types, some qualitative, whether that's open-end text responses, video responses. But going back to what Lauren said, the point there is not to do it completely for you. It's just to get that first draft, and then from there you can edit it, tweak it, make it your own. Yeah.
Is there a way for us to test or sample that? In other words, do you give us a chance to put in our objectives and our goals and see what the product looks like, or do we actually have to silence this?
We can talk about that after. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for attending the session. We do have a booth right outside, the big green booth. We have some chairs. Come chat with us. We're always happy to share more. And Lauren, thank you again so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for attending.